I was standing under Oshodi Bridge when I saw a young orphan girl lift a dying woman. Everyone else walked past. People laughed. Some shouted at her to leave. But what none of us knew was that a billionaire was watching, and the woman she carried was his missing mother. Not because I wanted to be there. Nobody wants to be there. But my bus had broken down, and the sun was already climbing fast, the kind of Lagos heat that presses on your head like a heavy hand. People were rushing past me, hawkers shouting, engines coughing, horns crying without rest. Life was loud, busy, hungry. Then I saw her. The old woman was lying close to the concrete pillar, half in the shade, half in the sun. Her wrapper was dirty. Her headscarf had slipped to one side. One arm lay stiff on the ground like it had forgotten how to move. People stepped around her. One man even jumped over her leg as if she was a sack of garbage. A woman selling oranges glanced once, hissed, and turned away. "She's drunk," someone muttered. "Mad woman," another said. I watched for a moment, waiting for anyone to stop. Nobody did. Then I saw a 21-year-old girl. She was small in size, thin, the kind of thin that comes from missing meals, not dieting. She wore a faded dress and flat slippers that looked tired of walking. Her hair was packed back neatly, but the edges were rough, like she had done it in a hurry. She slowed down. Everyone else kept moving. She stopped. I remember this clearly because stopping in Oshodi is dangerous. If you stop too long, the city swallows you. She looked at the old woman, not with fear, not with disgust, with concern. She bent slightly, her bag slipping from her shoulder. "Mama," she called softly. "Mama, can you hear me?" The old woman did not answer. The girl dropped her bag completely. "Mama?" she said again, louder now. Still nothing. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. People were watching now. Not to help. Just to see. "She wants to stress herself." Someone laughed. "Leave her," a bus conductor shouted. "You no get work?" The girl ignored them. She knelt on the dirty ground, not caring about her dress, and placed her hand on the woman's chest. Her face changed. "Ah," she whispered. She shook the woman gently. "Mama, please. Open your eyes." Nothing. I thought she would stand up then. Most people would. You try once. You walk away. You tell yourself you did your part. But she didn't. Instead, she slid one arm under the woman's shoulders and the other under her knees. People gasped. The woman was heavy. You could see it in the way the girl's arms trembled. "Hey, are you mad?" someone shouted. "Drop her." The girl's face tightened. Sweat broke out on her forehead. "I can't," she said, breathless. She's still breathing. Still, nobody moved to help. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw the Bentley. It was parked a little distance away, shining like it didn't belong in Oshodi. Black, clean, quiet. A tall man stood beside it. He was dressed simply, but nothing about him was simple. His posture was calm. His shoes were spotless. His wristwatch caught the light even under the bridge. I knew him. Everybody knew him. Johnson, the billionaire CEO. He was on the phone at first, his voice low, his face serious. But then he stopped talking. He was staring at the girl, at Amara. I didn't know her name yet, but later I would learn it. She tried to lift the woman. Her knees buckled. She almost fell. A cry rose from her throat, not fear, but effort. "Please," she begged, not looking at anyone. "Please help me." No one stepped forward. The billionaire took one step closer. Then another. I saw his driver glance at him, confused. Johnson's eyes never left the girl. "Sir?" the driver asked. Johnson raised a hand. The girl tried again. This time, she succeeded. She stood, the old woman cradled in her arms, her body shaking from the weight. Her slippers scraped the ground as she took one step forward. Then another. Her face was set with determination and fear. That was when Johnson moved fast. "Stop," he said. His voice cut through the noise like a knife. Everyone went quiet. Amara froze, her eyes wide. She turned slowly, still holding the woman. "I'm taking her to the hospital," she said quickly, her voice trembling. "Please, don't stop me." Johnson stared at the old woman's face. His breath caught. He stepped closer, closer. So close I could see his hands shake. "No," he whispered. No, this can't be. His phone slipped from his hand and hit the ground. Driver, he said hoarsely. Bring the car. He reached out, touched the woman's cheek gently. His eyes filled with tears. This is my mother, he said, his voice breaking. This is my missing mother. A gasp swept through the crowd. Amara's arms loosened in shock. Your mother, she whispered. Johnson looked at her, tears streaming now, gratitude and disbelief crashing together on his face. You saved my mother, he said. You saved my mother. The Bentley doors flew open. Quickly, Johnson shouted. Put her inside. Now. He turned to Amara. Get in, he said urgently. Please. Amara hesitated, her heart pounding, her world spinning. And as the car engine roared to life, as the crowd finally realized what had just happened, I knew nothing in that girl's life would ever be the same again. But none of us knew yet whether Madame Sandra would survive the night. I rode behind the Bentley on my bike for a short distance before traffic swallowed me. But I didn't need to see more to know this was no ordinary rescue. Oshodi had gone back to its noise, yet my ears kept ringing with one sentence. This is my mother. Later that day, news moved faster than traffic. Someone said the billionaire had rushed an old woman to the hospital. Someone else said the girl who carried her was an orphan. By evening, everybody had a version. But I wanted the truth. So 2 days later, I went to the hospital. That was where I saw Amara again. She sat on a long plastic chair outside the intensive care unit, her hands folded tightly in her lap. The same faded dress, the same tired slippers, only her eyes were different, red, swollen, fixed on the door like it might answer her prayers. She looked small in that bright white hallway. I sat across from her, pretending to scroll on my phone, listening. Doctors moved in and out, their faces serious. Nurses whispered. Machines beeped behind the doors, like stubborn hearts refusing to give up. Johnson paced. I had seen him on TV before, confident, smiling, powerful. The man I saw now was none of that. His jacket was gone. His tie was loose. He walked back and forth like a trapped animal, stopping every few steps to press his fingers to his forehead. Sir, a doctor said gently at one point, we are doing our best. Johnson nodded, but his eyes were fixed on the ICU door. Inside that room lay Madame Sandra. They said she had been missing for years. Some said she had lost her memory after a road accident. Some said she had been taken away by people who wanted ransom but abandoned her when things went wrong. Nobody knew the full story yet. All we knew was this. Her body was weak. Her breathing was shallow. And for hours, nothing changed. Night came. Morning came. Still nothing. Amara didn't move. A nurse offered her food. She shook her head. Johnson finally noticed her when the sun was already high on the second day. You, he said softly, walking toward her. You're Amara, right? She stood up quickly, almost knocking over the chair. Yes, sir, she said, lowering her head. He looked at her the way people look at miracles they don't understand. You haven't gone home, he said. She's not awake yet, Amara replied. I just want to know she's okay. Johnson swallowed hard. You carried her, he said slowly, when nobody else did. Amara's lips trembled. She reminded me of my mother, she said. My mother died when I was younger. Johnson said nothing for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone in that hallway. He sat down beside her. I searched for her for 7 years, he said quietly. 7 years, every street, every shelter, every hospital. Amara looked up at him, surprised. I thought she was dead, Johnson continued. But you found her. Tears rolled down his cheeks freely now. He didn't wipe them away. I don't know how to thank you, he said. Before Amara could answer, the ICU door opened. A doctor stepped out, his face tired but hopeful. She's responding, he said. Her vitals are improving. Amara let out a small cry and covered her mouth. Johnson stood up so fast, his chair fell backward. Can I see her? He asked. Not yet, the doctor said. But if she continues like this, she may wake up soon. That word wake up felt like light breaking into a dark room. 2 hours later, it happened. I wasn't in the room, but I saw it through the glass. Madame Sandra's fingers twitched. Then her eyes fluttered. Then slowly, like someone returning from a long journey, she opened them. Johnson rushed inside. Amara followed, hesitant, standing by the door. "Mom," Johnson whispered, his voice cracking. "Mama." Madame Sandra turned her head weakly. She stared at him. For a second, confusion clouded her eyes. Then, recognition. "My son?" she whispered. Johnson dropped to his knees. "Yes," he sobbed. "It's me." Madame Sandra lifted her hand shakily, but her eyes drifted past Johnson. They landed on Amara. Her gaze sharpened. "You," she said faintly. Amara stepped forward, tears running down her face. "Yes, Mama." Madame Sandra reached out with surprising strength and pulled Amara close, wrapping her arms around her neck. "This girl," she said, her voice weak but clear, "saved my life." The room went silent. Johnson covered his mouth, overwhelmed. From that moment, everything changed. Madame Sandra recovered slowly. Very slowly. But every day, she asked for Amara. "Where is my daughter?" she would ask. Johnson tried to explain, but Madame Sandra would shake her head. "She's not my daughter by blood," she would say, "but she's my daughter by heart." Amara visited every day. She cleaned, she fed, she talked. She told Madame Sandra about her small room, about losing her parents, about her dream. "I want to be a doctor," Amara said one afternoon, her voice shy, "so I can help people like you." Madame Sandra smiled. Johnson heard that. He remembered it. Weeks later, when Madame Sandra was strong enough to leave the hospital, Johnson called Amara into his office. "You said you want to be a doctor," he said. Amara nodded nervously. "I will help you," he said simply. Her eyes widened. "I will sponsor your education," Johnson continued. "All of it." Amara burst into tears. That day, Madame Sandra held Amara's hand tightly. "You gave me a second chance at life," she said. "Now life will give you yours." None of us knew then how deep that promise would go, because helping Amara into school was only the beginning. And somewhere between hospital visits, phone calls, and quiet gratitude, something unexpected had started growing in Johnson's heart. Something that would soon change all their lives forever. I didn't see Amara again for many months after Madame Sandra left the hospital. Life moved fast, as it always does in Lagos. But some stories refused to fade, and this was one of them. I heard pieces of it from different mouths, security guards, nurses, even a cleaner at the university hostel. Each person told it differently, but the center stayed the same. Amara had gone to school. Not just any school. University. The orphan, who once lived in a tiny room with one window and a leaking roof, was now walking through wide gates, carrying heavy books, learning how to save lives. The first time Johnson dropped her off, people stared. A black Bentley again. Students paused. Phones came out. Whispers spread like fire. Who is she? Is she his daughter? Is she related to him? Amara kept her head down. She did not dress flashy. She did not act proud. She walked into her lecture halls like someone who knew this chance was fragile. I later learned that Madame Sandra insisted Amara live close to campus, not in luxury, but not in suffering either. She must know comfort, Madame Sandra said, but she must also know humility. Johnson agreed. At first, his help was quiet. School fees paid on time. Books delivered without noise. A call once a week. How are your classes? Are you eating well? Is your health okay? Amara always answered politely. Yes, sir. No, sir. Thank you, sir. But I could hear it in her voice when she spoke to people, gratitude mixed with caution. She was afraid. Not of Johnson. Of losing everything again. University life was not easy for her. She struggled in her first year. Anatomy was hard. Long nights, heavy exams. Some students mocked her accent. Others laughed at her old phone. One night, she cried quietly in her room, staring at her notes, her dream feeling too big for her small hands. That was the night Johnson called unexpectedly. Amara, he said, hearing her sniffle. Are you okay? She tried to sound strong. Yes, sir. He paused. You don't sound okay. Something broke in her then. I'm trying, she whispered. I really am. Johnson listened. He didn't rush her. He didn't give speeches. He simply said, You carried my mother when you had nothing. You are stronger than you think. Those words stayed with her. She passed that semester. Then another. Years went by like pages turning. Madame Sandra grew stronger, happier. She laughed again. She gardened. She prayed every morning for Amara. That girl brought me back from the dead, she often said. I will never forget. Johnson visited the school sometimes. Not often enough to cause gossip, but enough to matter. When he came, he never stayed long. He asked about classes, about stress, about sleep. Slowly, something changed. Amara stopped shaking when she saw him. She started smiling. They talked about books, about patience, about childhood memories. Johnson told her stories about his mother, how she used to wake him early for school, how she sang while cooking. Amara listened, her eyes soft. I wish I met her before, she once said. Johnson looked at her quietly. She met you when it mattered. By her final year, Amara had changed. She still wore simple clothes, but she carried herself differently now, straighter, calmer, like someone who had found her place. Graduation day came with sunshine and tears. Madame Sandra attended, walking slowly but proudly. When Amara's name was called, she stood up and clapped like a child, tears rolling freely down her cheeks. That's my daughter, she cried. Johnson stood beside her, his chest tight. Amara graduated with honors. Soon after, she got a job at one of the best private hospitals in Lagos. Her first day, she wore a clean white coat and stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. I did it, she whispered. Life settled into a new rhythm. Work, calls, visits. But closeness has a way of sneaking up on people. Johnson began calling more often. Sometimes about work. Sometimes about nothing. Have you eaten? Did you get home safe? When Amara was sick one weekend, he drove across the city late at night just to check on her. Madame Sandra noticed. She said nothing. She simply watched. One evening, after Amara treated an emergency patient successfully, Johnson came to pick her up. They sat in the car longer than needed. Silence filled the space. Comfortable silence. Johnson looked at her and felt something unfamiliar tighten his chest. This was not gratitude. This was not duty. This was something else. He tried to ignore it. He couldn't. Amara felt it too, though she did not have a name for it. She found herself thinking about his voice during night shifts, about the way he listened, about how safe she felt around him. It scared her. One night, Madame Sandra called Amara into her room. Sit, she said gently. Amara obeyed. You and my son, Madame Sandra said softly, watching her face. You have grown close. Amara's heart jumped. Mama, Madame Sandra raised a hand. I am not blind, she said with a small smile. I see love before it speaks. Amara stood up quickly. No, Mama, she said. I can never think of such. He is too much. Madame Sandra laughed quietly. So was your dream, she replied. Yet here you are. Amara left that room shaking. The thought followed her everywhere. And one evening, as Johnson sat alone in his office, staring at his phone, his heart pounding with fear and hope, he realized he was in love. Deeply, dangerously, with the girl who once carried his dying mother through Oshodi. But loving her meant risking everything. His name, her peace, their bond. And as he finally picked up his phone to call her, he didn't know whether that call would bring them together or destroy the fragile world they had built. I was there the night Johnson finally decided to speak. Not inside the room, people like me don't enter those kinds of rooms, but close enough to feel the air change. It was raining that evening, the soft Lagos rain that looks gentle but soaks you before you notice. Johnson stood by the window in his living room, phone in hand, watching the lights of the city blur and stretch. Madame Sandra sat on her favorite chair behind him, a shawl around her shoulders, prayer beads resting in her palm. He had been quiet all day. Too quiet. Madame Sandra studied him the way mothers do when they already know the truth. You have been walking in circles, she said calmly. Sit. Johnson didn't turn. Mama, he said, his voice low. People will talk. They always do, she replied. He sighed. They will say I planned it, that I used my money, that I rescued her to take her. Madame Sandra's eyes softened. Did you? No, he said quickly. God knows. Then why are you afraid? She asked. Johnson finally faced her. His face looked tired. Stripped of power. She is young, he said. She worked hard to become who she is. I don't want to stain her life. Madame Sandra smiled sadly. Love does not stain, fear does. She reached for his hand. Amara carried me when nobody else did, she said. If loving her is your truth, then speak it with clean hands. Johnson nodded slowly, but his chest still felt tight. That same evening, Amara finished a long shift at the hospital. Her feet hurt. Her head throbbed. She was washing her hands when her phone vibrated. Johnson calling. Her heart skipped. Sir? She answered. Can I see you? He asked. Tonight. Her stomach twisted. Is Mama okay? She's fine, he said. Please. They met at a quiet restaurant, one with soft lights and no loud music. Johnson arrived first. He stood when Amara walked in, his eyes searching her face as if checking she was real. She looked simple, clean, tired, beautiful. They sat. Silence settled. Johnson cleared his throat. How was work? Busy, she replied. But good. Another pause. Amara felt something coming. Her fingers curled under the table. Amara, Johnson began, then stopped. He took a breath. Before I speak, I need you to understand something. She nodded slowly. I never planned this, he said. I never imagined my life would turn this way. Her chest tightened. You saved my mother, he continued. You changed my family. You changed me. Amara's eyes dropped. Sir, I only did what anyone should. No, he interrupted gently. Most people didn't. He leaned forward. I have been fighting this, he said quietly. Because I am afraid of hurting you. Her breath caught. People will judge, he went on. They will talk. They will twist the story. Amara felt heat rise behind her eyes. Sir, she whispered, please don't say what you're about to say. Johnson froze. Why? He asked softly. Because if you say it, she said, her voice shaking, and it's not real. I don't think I will survive it. His heart cracked open at her honesty. He reached across the table, but stopped halfway, respecting her space. It is real, he said. Too real. Amara stood abruptly, chair scraping. I need air, she said. She walked outside into the rain. Johnson followed. The rain soaked them both in seconds. Amara, he called. She turned, tears mixing with rain. I don't want to be your mistake, she said. I don't want to be a chapter people laugh at. Johnson stepped closer, his voice firm now. You are not a mistake, he said. You are my miracle. She shook her head. You are a billionaire. I was nobody. You were never nobody, he replied. You were the only one who stopped. They stood there, hearts pounding, the city watching without caring. From a distance, I saw them, two people caught between truth and fear. Johnson took a deep breath. I will not touch you, he said. I will not pressure you, but I need you to know how I feel. Amara's lips trembled. I care for you, he said. Deeply. Silence stretched. Amara closed her eyes. When she opened them, her voice was calm, but her heart was racing. I care for you too, she admitted. That is why this scares me. They stood apart, the rain filling the space between them. That night, they went home separately. The next weeks were heavy. They spoke less, worked more, avoided what they felt. Madame Sandra noticed. She called Amara one afternoon. Come and see me, she said. Amara arrived quietly. Madame Sandra held her hands. Love is not a sin, she said. Fear is what destroys it. Amara cried in her arms. Johnson, meanwhile, reached a breaking point. He stood in his room one night, staring at a small box on his table. He had bought it days ago. He hadn't opened it. He hadn't slept. By morning, his decision was made. He called his driver. Prepare the car, he said. We are going somewhere. As the Bentley rolled out, Johnson's heart hammered with a single thought. If he spoke now, everything would change forever. And somewhere across the city, Amara felt a strange heaviness in her chest, not knowing that the next time she saw him, nothing would ever be the same. I knew something big was coming the morning Johnson drove out of his house with that look on his face. I have seen powerful men before. I have seen angry men. I have seen proud men. But the look on Johnson's face that day was different. It was the look of a man who had decided to stop running. He went straight to Amara's hospital. Not through the back door. Not quietly. He walked in openly, ignoring the curious stares, the whispers, the phones that lifted slowly into the air. I was there, waiting to see someone else. When I saw him step into the corridor, Amara was just coming out of a ward, her white coat slightly stained, her hair pulled back neatly. She looked tired but strong. Stronger than the girl I had seen under Oshodi Bridge. When she saw Johnson, she stopped. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Johnson did something nobody expected. He dropped to his knees. Right there. In the hospital corridor. People gasped. Phones came out fully now. Amara froze, her hands shaking. "Sir, please," she whispered. "Stand up." Johnson didn't. He looked up at her, his eyes clear, steady, unashamed. "I am not ashamed of you," he said loudly enough for people to hear. "I am not afraid of what they will say." Tears filled Amara's eyes. "You saved my mother," he continued. "You changed my life. You changed who I am." The corridor went silent. "I love you," Johnson said, "and I want to spend the rest of my life proving that." He opened the small box. The ring caught the light. "I am asking you," he said, his voice breaking just a little. "Will you marry me?" Amara sank to her knees too, not because she was weak, but because her heart could no longer hold everything it felt. "Yes," she cried. "Yes." The hospital erupted. Some people clapped, some cried, some shook their heads in disbelief. But one person stood at the end of the corridor, tears running freely down her face. Madame Sandra. She walked slowly toward them, her steps careful but proud. She placed her hands on both their heads and prayed quietly. "The girl who saved my life," she said, her voice trembling, "will now become my daughter forever." The wedding came weeks later. Simple, beautiful, full of meaning. Amara walked down the aisle slowly, her heart pounding. Madame Sandra held her arm. "I walked you once into life," Madame Sandra whispered. "Now I walk you into love." Johnson waited at the front, his eyes fixed on Amara like nothing else existed. When they said their vows, there was no drama. Just truth. Just gratitude. Just love that had grown from kindness. Life did not suddenly become perfect, but it became full. 2 years later, when Amara held her baby girl for the first time, she cried harder than anyone expected. Johnson leaned close. "What name do you want?" Amara smiled through tears. "Sophia," she said softly, "after the kindness that taught me who I could become." Madame Sandra held the baby, her hands shaking with joy. "The bridge where we met death," she said quietly, "led us all to life. Sometimes, when I pass Oshodi Bridge now, I still look at that pillar. People still rush. Life is still loud. Many still walk past pain. But every time I remember that day, one question refuses to leave my heart. If Amara had chosen to walk past, like everyone else, how many lives would have remained broken forever? When kindness costs you time, comfort, or safety, would you stop? Or would you walk past too? If you like this story, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.